Vinod Matkar was a boy no one noticed, a man no one saw coming, and a criminal mastermind who built a hidden empire stretching from the streets of Mumbai to the shadows of the United States. From observing every move in crowded markets, to secretly controlling warehouses and shipments thousands of miles away, Vinod's rise was silent, calculated, and terrifying. Every step he took left rivals confused, law enforcement scrambling, and his enemies disappearing without a trace. This is the real story of how Vinod Matkar became Mumbai's hidden mafia king, and why, even today, no one knows where he is. Vinod Matkar's childhood blended into the noise of Mumbai so quietly that most people never remembered seeing him. He lived in a cramped building, where families argued, children cried, and vendors shouted from dawn to nightfall. Nothing about him seemed special. He didn't cause trouble, didn't chase after crowds, and didn't speak unless needed. But behind that silence, something unusual was growing. Vinod had a sharpness in his eyes that adults ignore. He watched everything around him with a strange interest: delivery routes, market schedules, police patrols, even the way local criminals moved through alleys. Most children played games in the street. Vinod observed life like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. His father worked at the docks, a place full of secrets and shadows. Illegal shipments often slipped through late at night, and men who asked too many questions disappeared. Vinod's father was one of those men. One evening he left home with a small metal lunchbox, and never returned. His mother cried for days, but no official search was made. The neighbors whispered that the dock gangs had punished him for witnessing something he shouldn't have. That loss created a silent fire inside Vinod, a fire that didn't burn outward, but shaped every thought he had. After his father vanished, Vinod began spending more time outside, wandering near warehouses, markets, and transport stands. He blended easily with street kids, yet he was different. He wasn't attracted to quick money or petty fights like the others. Instead, he learned how information traveled, how one rumor could shift power, how one mistake could bring down a group, how one hidden path could change everything. He understood early that the strongest person wasn't the loudest, but the one who knew what others ignored. By the age of 15, he had already built secret pathways across neighborhoods. He knew which streets stayed quiet at night, which corners police avoided, and which shops stored illegal goods behind locked shutters. Without violence or threats, he became valuable to local street groups who needed someone with information. They didn't fully trust him, but they relied on him. He was too calm, too aware, and too mysterious to underestimate. Despite this small rise, Vinod remained invisible in public. To most people, he was just another thin boy moving through busy lanes. But a few sharp minds noticed something different. An elderly cobbler who sat near the main market once said Vinod walked like someone counting his steps. A spice seller claimed he had eyes like someone listening to distant sounds. These observations spread quietly, giving Vinod a strange kind of reputation. Not dangerous, not powerful, just unpredictable. His mother tried keeping him away from street groups, but the world around them offered little protection. Their building was controlled by loan collectors who demanded money from families every month. Vinod watched how these collectors operated, how they tracked people, how they remembered debts, how they hid money. He finally understood what destroyed his father. Weakness invited cruelty. Silence gave others power. But calculated silence could give power back. One night, while sitting on the building's terrace, Vinod made a decision that changed everything. If the world worked through control, then he would master the systems nobody else paid attention to. He would never face the same helpless fear his father experienced, and he would never let anyone decide his fate again. From that moment, the quiet boy Mumbai, ignored, began shaping a future no one could predict. A future built not on noise or violence, but on hidden strategies strong enough to shake entire cities. As Vinod Matkar grew older, his silence became his identity. People didn't know whether to fear him or ignore him, because he never reacted the way they expected. While other young men in his neighborhood chased quick fame through street fights and petty crimes, Vinod focused on something far more unusual. He studied patterns: who borrowed money, who struggled, who pretended to be rich, and who controlled the flow of cash inside Mumbai's crowded markets. He understood that real power didn't come from knives or fists. It came from knowing things before others did. This mindset led him to a man named Raghu Moore, a thin and nervous accountant who worked in a cramped office above a jewelry shop. Raghu was not a criminal. He feared trouble, but he had one skill that Vinod needed. He handled financial records for dozens of small businesses, and he knew every detail about their debts, profits, and weaknesses. Vinod approached him in his careful, calculated way. He didn't threaten him or pressure him. He simply observed him until Raghu realized that Vinod already knew too much about him. In a world built on fear, no threats were needed. Raghu started giving Vinod quiet access to information: names of people who owed large amounts of money, families on the brink of collapse, shop owners cutting illegal deals to survive. Vinod used this knowledge wisely. Instead of attacking or extorting, he offered help through intermediaries. No one ever saw him directly. A small loan here, a delayed payment there, a favor approved quietly. People slowly became dependent on these invisible hands, unaware that the boy they once overlooked was controlling them from the shadows. Vinod understood a rule most gangsters ignored: if you control debt, you control people. So he learned how money flowed from shop to landlord, from supplier to customer, from borrower to collector. He also discovered who the real power players were: the ones who pretended to be ordinary, but held silent control over entire blocks. These hidden forces fascinated him more than the loud criminals who acted tough on the streets. Raghu watched Vinod's rise with both fear and confusion. Vinod never asked for unnecessary details, never bragged, and never demanded quick results. He was building something slower and deeper, something even Raghu couldn't fully understand. Vinod was weaving an invisible net around the markets, a net made of information instead of violence. This strategy made him unpredictable to the local gangs. They saw money disappearing from their usual targets, and had no idea why. They sensed someone new was moving in the background, but no one had a face or name. By the time they suspected him, Vinod had already spread too far to be stopped easily. He placed a quiet observer inside the supply yards, another inside the trucking lines, and another near the wholesale market. None of these people knew they were working for him. They only knew they were paid well to share small details: when shipments arrived, which shop had financial trouble, which storage units were unmonitored at night. Vinod combined all of this into a complete picture that no one else possessed. The strange part was that Vinod still looked like the same overlooked young man. He wore ordinary clothes, carried no fancy items, and behaved as if he owned nothing. But underneath that calm appearance, a new philosophy had formed. Information was power, silence was armor, and patience was a weapon more dangerous than any gun. By the end of this phase, Vinod had something most criminals never achieved: control without visibility. People feared gangs, but they depended on Vinod's invisible support without even knowing his name. He had built the foundation of an empire no one could see, and for Vinod, this was only the beginning. The moment Vinod Matkar stepped into Mumbai's busiest market area, he understood he had found the perfect place to grow his hidden network. The market was chaotic, crowded with traders shouting prices, workers carrying heavy boxes, and trucks rushing in and out from sunrise until late night. Most criminals avoided this place because controlling it required constant presence and dangerous confrontations. But Vinod didn't use force. He used structure, observation, and timing. He began by placing a quiet, loyal man named Karan Vichare inside the supply chain system. Karan was not physically strong, but he had a rare ability to blend into any environment. People forgot his face minutes after seeing him, which made him the perfect tool for Vinod. Karan worked as a simple assistant, loading and unloading trucks, sweeping store floors, and helping drivers with heavy items. No one noticed him collecting critical information, delivery timings, security shifts, storage habits, and the weak points in the transport routes. Vinod studied these reports like a mathematician solving a complex problem. He marked which routes were unguarded, which warehouses stayed unlocked longer than usual, and which shop owners stored expensive goods without proper security. With this knowledge, he slowly began redirecting small amounts of black market goods toward his own hidden storages. It happened silently. No alarms, no confrontations, no suspicion. Textile shops, scrap dealers, and warehouse owners unknowingly became part of his growing network. Vinod never met them directly. He used intermediaries for every move. He never walked into risky areas himself. He stayed invisible, guiding his operations like a ghost in the city. The market's rhythm changed quietly as he tightened his grip, but nobody realized it was happening. His strategy created confusion among small-time rival gangs. They sensed that someone was shifting control away from them, but they couldn't identify who. Their usual targets suddenly had protection. Their usual income lines became unpredictable. A few gang members tried to regain territory by intimidating shopkeepers, but Vinod was always 3 steps ahead. He made sure supplies arrived early for cooperative shops and delayed the supplies of shops connected to rivals. This subtle manipulation made Vinod's supporters stronger and his opponents weaker. A turning point came when a small gang leader attempted to ambush one of Vinod's delivery vans, thinking it belonged to a rival gang. The attack failed because the van was empty, and the timing was off. Instead of panicking, Vinod used this mistake to his advantage. He allowed the incident to spread through the underworld, making it appear as if the attacking gang had violated a silent boundary. This misdirection caused 2 rival groups to clash with each other, creating a conflict that kept them busy for weeks. While they fought among themselves, Vinod expanded more aggressively. He took over abandoned storages, bribed low-level guards, and used nighttime workers to shift goods between hidden locations. The chaos created by the gang fight allowed him to move freely in the shadows without raising suspicion. Karan's role strengthened during this period. He managed transport drivers, influencing who delivered where and when. Through him, Vinod placed loyal drivers into important routes. These drivers didn't know the full plan. They simply followed orders and were paid well. Their loyalty wasn't emotional. It was financial, which Vinod preferred. Money kept secrets better than friendship. As weeks turned into months, the market's backbone slowly bent in Vinod's favor. He controlled storage units, distribution lines, and black market inventories, all while staying out of sight. Local criminals talked about a mysterious force taking over, a strategist who never appeared in public yet controlled everything with precision. By the time the rival gangs realized someone new was rising, Vinod had already spread his influence too deep to remove. He had mastered the art of silent domination. Mumbai's busiest market, once chaotic and uncontrolled, was now operating according to a rhythm he created. And still, almost no one knew his name. As Vinod Matkar's silent control over Mumbai's market deepened, he became more aware of the invisible danger around him. Success in the underworld never stayed hidden for long. Every powerful move created a shadow, and every shadow attracted eyes. The police did not know his name yet, but they sensed a growing shift in illegal activities. Rival groups felt their grip weakening. Whispered rumors spread about a quiet new force shaping the city's black market operations. Vinod understood that this stage of invisibility wouldn't last forever. If he wanted to stay ahead, he needed to move before the world recognized him. Instead of going deeper underground in Mumbai like most criminals, Vinod made a decision that surprised even himself. He vanished. No confrontation, no farewell, no sign. He left India using forged documents and boarded a cheap flight with the appearance of a man running from debt, not building an empire. This calculated disappearance became one of his smartest decisions, because while rivals searched for him in Mumbai's alleys, he was already thousands of miles away, stepping onto American soil. The United States offered something Mumbai never could: anonymity on a much larger scale. In New Jersey, the Indian community was growing fast, blending into local neighborhoods and small business districts. It was easy for an outsider to disappear in plain sight. Vinod rented a small room above a grocery store, kept a low profile and observed. Observation had always been his strength, and here it became a powerful weapon. He learned quickly that many immigrants struggled with financial issues. Restaurants fought rising rents, trucking companies faced high fuel costs, and family-run stores competed for survival. Most of these businesses needed money urgently, but avoided large banks because of strict requirements. Vinod recognized the same weakness he had once exploited in Mumbai: desperation. He didn't offer violence, he offered solutions disguised as help. Using small amounts of his hidden Mumbai earnings, he created front companies with fake names. These companies gave short-term loans to struggling businesses, offering simple repayment terms. The owners never questioned where the funds came from, because they were too relieved to receive them. They didn't know that their quiet savior was building invisible chains around their operations. Within months, Vinod's influence spread through small hotels, catering suppliers, and independent truck drivers. He never spoke publicly, never attended community events, and never let anyone know his real identity. Every transaction went through layers of fake paperwork, creating a maze that led nowhere. He remained a ghost, controlling more than anyone realized. The key to his expansion came from discovering how goods moved between American ports and South Asian stores. Import businesses relied heavily on late-night deliveries, often handled by exhausted truckers who barely checked the crates. Vinod saw opportunity in this chaos. He made connections through casual observations: who worked long hours, who struggled with debt, who could be quietly paid to alter shipment records. He wasn't stealing goods, he was controlling supply points without being noticed. His break came when he spotted a vulnerable shipping warehouse on the outskirts of Jersey City. The managers were understaffed and overwhelmed. Their paperwork system was dated, their security cameras barely worked, and their night shift depended on 2 aging guards. This weakness gave Vinod the opening he needed. Through intermediaries, he gained silent influence over the flow of goods, adjusting routes and hiding errors in the system. For the warehouse staff, nothing seemed unusual, but the real pipeline behind the scenes belonged to Vinod now. This move changed him forever. Mumbai had shaped him, but America transformed him. He was no longer a local societist, he was an international operator. The way he operated became more refined, more secretive, and more ambitious. He built connections through favors instead of fear, through systems instead of street threats. Vinod had crossed continents not to escape his past but to expand it. And as he watched shipments move under his hidden control, he realized he was no longer just building an empire. He was building a legend the world would never fully see. Vinod Matkar's rise in the United States was not loud or violent. It was silent, steady, and deeply calculated. His small operations grew into something far bigger, something that touched multiple industries without attracting attention. In America, he understood quickly that building an empire required people with skills he didn't possess. So he chose 3 individuals who could strengthen his reach without knowing too much about him. The first was Sohail Pushara, a friendly community-focused man who blended easily with South Asian families. Sohail was always invited to gatherings, business openings, and temple events. People trusted him without effort. Vinod used this natural charm to gain access to information he wouldn't get himself. Sohail didn't know the full purpose of what he shared. He simply believed he was helping a mysterious businessman who offered him steady payment. Through Sohail, Vinod learned which families were struggling, which owners were hiding financial losses, and which business groups were quietly fighting for dominance. This knowledge helped Vinod choose his next moves with precision. The second person was Trenton Marks, a warehouse supervisor who understood the trucking world better than anyone around him. Trenton lived a rough life, constantly moving between night shifts and long drives. But he had one quality Vinod valued: absolute loyalty to whoever paid him well. Trenton didn't care about morals or legality. He cared about stability. He became Vinod's access point to storage units, trucking schedules and late-night cargo movements. Through him, Vinod quietly redirected certain shipments, delayed others, and created invisible pockets in the supply chain where goods could be shifted without anyone noticing. Trenton handled physical control, which Vinod preferred to keep far from his own hands. The final member was Ian Bell, a soft-spoken but highly intelligent forger. Ian had a talent for paperwork manipulation, fake IDs, business registrations, tax documents, and shipping forms. In a world where systems controlled everything, someone who could bend those systems was priceless. Vinod used Ian to create clean paper trails for every suspicious activity. Businesses that received his secret loans appeared legitimate. Trucks that carried redirected goods showed proper documentation. Even digital records matched perfectly. Ian ensured that if anyone searched for Vinod's involvement, they would find nothing. With these three working in their own corners, Vinod built something extraordinary. He stayed in the shadows, never appearing in meetings, never signing documents, never using his real identity. Instructions were passed through coded notes, encrypted messages, and sometimes just simple exchanges disguised as casual conversations. None of the three men had met each other directly. They had no idea they were part of the same operation. Vinod designed it that way to prevent any single person from understanding the full picture. Money began flowing into Vinod's hidden accounts. He invested in small real estate properties through shell companies, buying old shops and warehouses at low prices. Within months, those properties became centers of quiet activity, storing goods and documents tied to multiple operations. His influence touched late-night clubs, trucking fleets, food distribution networks, and even construction suppliers. Each industry offered a different layer of protection. If one collapsed, the others would absorb the shock. What made Vinod so dangerous was his ability to disappear behind his empire. No photos, no social activity, no public presence. People dealt with shadows without realizing it. Rumors began spreading about a mysterious investor who never met anyone face to face. Some feared him, some admired him, and some didn't believe he existed at all. This confusion was exactly what Vinod wanted. Fear without clarity was more powerful than open intimidation. As his network strengthened, Vinod began adjusting the flow of money through small but strategic changes. A struggling restaurant suddenly recovered because its competitor faced unexpected supply delays. A trucking company became profitable after mysteriously gaining exclusive access to certain routes. A warehouse owner believed he got lucky after landing a big contract. But in truth, every outcome was engineered by Vinod, sitting quietly behind layers of silence. His empire had no name, no symbol, and no visible leadership. Yet it grew larger than many known criminal organizations. Vinod had mastered the art of creating power without drawing a single spotlight. He had become the hidden force shaping industries across state lines. But with every expansion, the risk increased. More money meant more attention. More connections meant more chances for mistakes. Vinod knew this. He understood the danger. Yet he continued building, convinced that his invisible strategy would protect him forever. He had no idea that an unexpected threat was already watching him, preparing to break the silence he had created so carefully. A sudden stillness settled over the night as Armin stepped out of the abandoned mill, the chilling air wrapping around him like a warning. The distant echo of police sirens reminded him that time was collapsing fast, each second dragging him closer to a truth he wasn't prepared to face. Maria's last recorded message kept replaying in his mind, her trembling voice confessing that she had uncovered something monstrous, something connected to him in ways he didn't yet understand. Armin felt the weight of betrayal and desperation blending into a dangerous haze, pushing him deeper into a darkness he thought he had long escaped. As he approached his car, he noticed a strange silhouette near the driver's side window. At first he assumed it was one of the gang members tailing him, but as the figure stepped forward into the faint light, Armin froze. It was Cassandra, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she clutched a blood-stained envelope. She didn't move until he came within a few steps, her voice cracking as she whispered that everything was falling apart faster than they could hold it together. She explained that the envelope had been shoved under her apartment door earlier that evening, and the blood on it wasn't hers. Armand took it from her hands, noticing how fresh the stains were. His heart pounded violently as he pulled out the photographs hidden inside. They were of Maria, tied to a rusted chair, her face bruised, her eyes filled with terror. Each photo was stamped with a time, each one taken at intervals of 10 minutes. The last one ended with a chilling message scrawled across the bottom. "Come alone if you want her alive." Armand felt the ground tilt beneath him. He knew who had done this before Cassandra even said the name. Victor, the ghost from his past he thought had died years ago in a warehouse fire, Armand himself had caused. Cassandra begged him not to go, insisting it was a trap designed to destroy him completely. But Armand was already lost in his thoughts, the old memories clawing their way back with unforgiving sharpness. Victor had been his closest friend once, a brother in every way except blood. But greed had split them apart, and Armand's attempt to sabotage Victor's escape with millions in stolen cash had ended in chaos and flames. Victor survived, and now he wanted the same kind of suffering returned. Armand got into his car, but Cassandra yanked the door open, tears streaking down her face as she said she couldn't let him walk into something that would get him killed. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, promising her that he had no choice. Victor would never stop, not until he destroyed everything Armand cared about, and Maria was the last piece of innocence left in both their lives. The engine roared to life as Armand drove into the night, following the coordinates scribbled on the back of the final photo. Cassandra watched helplessly as the taillights disappeared, silently praying that Armand would return, even though she knew the place he was heading for was the same warehouse where Victor had once burned, and this time, only one of them would leave alive. Vinod Matkar's empire, built quietly over years, began to show cracks he had never anticipated. Every system he had put in place to remain invisible had relied on absolute precision, and for the first time, one small mistake threatened to unravel everything. Ethan Crowley, a former customs investigator, had started noticing irregularities in shipment records that seemed minor at first. A slight delay here, a missing document there, and unusual patterns in the flow of imported goods. No one else noticed them, but Ethan's trained eyes detected the invisible thread linking these events together. It was as if someone was manipulating the system, quietly bending it to their own will, and the deeper Ethan dug, the closer he came to uncovering Vinod's hidden network. Vinod had always underestimated investigators, who worked quietly, assuming that fear and distance would protect him. In Mumbai, silence had been his strongest weapon. In America, it had served him just as well, until Ethan began connecting the dots. The shipping manifests, warehouse logs, and small discrepancies that Vinod had carefully concealed now formed a map that led straight to him. One of Vinod's trusted intermediaries had made a minor error in routing a shipment, leaving a trail Ethan could follow. Vinod had never expected that even the smallest oversight could have such consequence. As Ethan closed in, Vinod sensed the walls of his carefully built empire beginning to tremble. He had always prepared for rivals, thieves, and law enforcement raids, but he had never anticipated someone piecing together a puzzle that, on the surface, seemed ordinary. The quiet accountant who had managed the initial records, the loyal warehouse manager, and the skilled forger, all of them had operated under the assumption that nothing could be traced back to Vinod. Now every carefully orchestrated plan was vulnerable. The first warning came in subtle ways. One of his front companies received a subpoena, a letter that seemed routine but carried an undertone of danger. A trucking route he had controlled for months was suddenly audited. Small business owners who had trusted him began asking questions about the money they received, noticing odd patterns and inconsistencies. These minor tremors were enough to trigger Vinod's instincts. He knew he had to act before the investigation spread further, but moving too quickly could expose him entirely. Vinod attempted to cover his tracks by shifting operations, rerouting shipments and creating new shell companies. He contacted Sohail, Trenton and Iane, giving them precise instructions to obscure the trail. Every movement was deliberate, every step measured, yet, with each attempt to hide, the pressure increased. Ethan Crawley wasn't just following paper trails, he was understanding Vinod's patterns, predicting how he would respond, and staying one step ahead. The invisible empire that had grown for years suddenly seemed fragile, like a spider web in a storm. Vinod realized that the mistakes of the past, minor oversights ignored for years, had now become critical vulnerabilities. A single ledger, a single misrouted shipment, could expose everything. For the first time he felt the fear he had never allowed himself to feel. The empire he had built in silence was under siege, not by loud criminals or rival gangs, but by a patient observer who understood the world Vinod had constructed. Even as he worked to salvage the situation, Vinod could sense the inevitability of confrontation. He had been invisible for too long, and the shadows he relied on were shrinking. The quiet man who had once controlled entire industries without leaving a trace now understood that someone was watching him as closely as he had watched others. Every decision, every move, had to be flawless, or his empire would collapse in ways he had never imagined possible. Vinod Matkar had always believed that invisibility was his greatest weapon, that silence and strategy could protect him from any threat. But when federal agents closed in on multiple warehouses, shell companies and shipments connected to him, he realized that even the most carefully constructed empire could be shaken. Sohail Pujara was the first to be arrested, taken from his apartment quietly in the night. Trenton Marks disappeared without a trace, leaving only his truck abandoned on the highway. Ian Bell attempted to destroy sensitive documents, but the authorities intercepted him before he could finish. Vinod's web, built over years with patience and precision, began to unravel at an alarming speed, faster than he could have ever anticipated. He didn't panic. Panic had never served him. Instead, he retreated to an old mechanic's garage in rural Pennsylvania, a place no one would think to search. The garage was dusty, filled with unused machinery and oil-stained tools, but it was perfect for a man who needed to disappear completely. He watched the world outside through grimy windows, listening to every distant sound, calculating the risk of movement, and waiting for any hint that his pursuers were approaching. Months of careful observation had taught him to remain patient, even when the walls closed in. Despite the collapse of his network, Vinod had one advantage left: unpredictability. No one knew how he would move, where he might strike next, or if he would even appear at all. He had built contingency plans in every layer of his operations, and one of those plans was already quietly in motion. A mysterious investment company had been established under false names months earlier, with a structure so complex that tracing it back to him was nearly impossible. The company was already acquiring properties, warehouses and businesses in multiple states, all operating legally on the surface. To outsiders, Vinod had vanished. But in reality he was simply shifting to a new form of control, one that didn't require him to be seen. Rumors began spreading in the underworld. Some claimed Vinod had been arrested in a daring raid, others that he had fled the country, and a few whispered that he had been killed to prevent further chaos. None of these reports were true. Vinod had learned long ago that myths could be more powerful than reality. By allowing people to believe he was gone, he removed the immediate threat while retaining influence over systems they could no longer control. The authorities, frustrated by dead ends and missing links, eventually reduced active searches. Warehouse managers were released, shipments returned, and investigators moved on to more visible cases. The empire that had once seemed invincible had fractured, but Vinod's hand remained hidden in the background. He no longer needed to touch every shipment, speak to every intermediary, or personally oversee operations. The empire had learned to function without him, built perfectly to survive even his absence. In the shadows, Vinod began planning his next moves. He observed from afar, studying new markets, noting vulnerabilities and refining his strategies. He had survived the collapse of his network, the exposure of his associates, and the relentless scrutiny of law enforcement. Each challenge had only sharpened his mind, making him more cautious, more precise, and more impossible to locate. The legend of Vinod Matkar grew in silence. To the world he had disappeared. To those in the underworld, he had become untouchable. His story ended not with capture or death, but with disappearance, leaving behind only the terrifying knowledge that the hidden king still watched, still calculated, and still controlled more than anyone could ever imagine. Even now, years later, no one could confirm his whereabouts, yet everyone agreed on one unspoken truth: Vinod Matkar never truly left.